deep breaths, inhaling and exhaling. And then allowing your breath to return to its natural rhythm. And letting go of everything that came before on each exhale. Allowing yourself to arrive in this space, here and now. And take one or two more breaths. Again, keep continuing to land, creating some space and grounding ourselves. So that may have helped some of you to leave behind your day. And if not, that's okay too. We bring whatever we bring, and there's no judgment, but we're here. And I encourage you to maybe take out a pen and paper this evening, write down your thoughts, emotions that rise up. This is powerful conversation that we're engaging in. So I'll turn this back over to Erica now.
So, thank you so much, Charlotte and Kathy and Amy. We're going to try our first Zoom poll tonight, and it's a multiple choice poll, so you can choose more than one answer. And the question is going to be, I'm here tonight because, and your answers will be, I live in Kingston, I work in Kingston, I play in Kingston, I pray in Kingston, or none of the above. Looking forward to seeing what you've got to say. Ooh, 67% of you, 75% of you play in Kingston. 17% of us live in Kingston. Same number, work in Kingston. Oh, yeah, so 6 out of 8 of you play in Kingston. 3 of you live in Kingston. And of course, that doesn't include us as co-hosts and moderators because we didn't take the poll. 1 of you works in Kingston. And I know that some of these are overlapping, so I wonder if you all answered as many as you could. 1 of you prays in Kingston, and a few of you folks are just wanting to be a part of this discussion, which is still really wonderful. So thank you. Thank you for taking our poll.
All right, next thing we're gonna do is try just a temperature check. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling? 1 is like not good at all. 10 is you're feeling really great. And you can just type in a number 1 to 10 and or any words that you're feeling or thinking right now for how it's going. And we will read the chat for those who are on YouTube and can't see the chat. So go ahead, have at it. All right, we've got somebody at a 5, smack dab in the middle. Somebody else is feeling like an 8, nice. Tough week, a 4, yep. 7. Guys are feeling shy, is that on there too? All right, so nobody's a 1, which is a great thing. Nobody's a 10 either. Hungry only moments ago and now feeling much better. Yes, love to have food in the belly. An 8, happy to be here in this space. We're very happy to have you here. Thank you. All right. And we'll turn it over to Miss Amy again.
I'm back. So before we begin our community discussion, using the chat feature again, maybe if you didn't participate in that last one, or even if you did, if you could tell us your name and what brought you here. We shared a little bit about ourselves, or maybe what brought you back tonight if you have shared previously.
have some people here tired of the racial discord in America. Someone else is here because they were invited by awesome people to co-moderate this. Yes. We have another person whose temperature is an 8. All right. Can everyone see the chat? That was a question that was put out there. So.
If you can't see the chat, somewhere you might have 3 little dots that offer you some more options, and one of them is to see the chat. Or if you have a different screen, it looks like a little text box.
Yep. It's quiet in the chat tonight.
It is. Maybe we should just get into things.
Yeah. The depth and breadth of the learning profoundly impacted by Kendi. Nice. Want to hear from others. Nice. So do we. Feeling fortunate that I was told about this series. Good. We're feeling fortunate that you are here.
I'm here because I want things to be better for all humans. I want to learn more about how I can best be of service to those with less privilege in our community. And we will definitely have some suggestions at the end, and would love to hear other people's thoughts about that as well. Back to meet community members who are interested in furthering these discussions. Thank you all for being here. Agreed. Thank you.
Cool. You're moving into community discussion time?
Yeah.
I love it. All right, so I'm going to jump right into question number 1. Just a reminder, again, my name is Erica, and I know that it can be difficult sometimes sharing, but we'd love to hear you speak up and share your thoughts and ideas and even questions. And again, if you don't feel comfortable speaking up, you can always put your question in the chat and we can read it out loud. So question number 1 is, in How to Be an Anti-Racist, Kendi thinks that we should assess candidates as being racist or anti-racist based on what ideas they are expressing and what policies they are supporting, and not what they say is in their bones or their heart. Do you agree with him? Why or why not? Heavy one.
Yeah.
Also relevant because we are less than a month away from, we're 3 weeks away from an election, 2.5 weeks, something like that. Or 2 weeks and like in 2 days or something.
I think Leslie has her hand up, Erica.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
A million different screens open.
Yeah. You got to unmute, Leslie.
You are still muted.
Oh, no, she's unmuted now. Oh,
Okay, let's see if that works.
Yeah.
Okay.
That works.
Okay. Basically, I agree with him, and especially because basically, most racists don't consider themselves racists, so they'll say one thing, but what they really follow and the policies they support and the ideas are more likely to be what they're really feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's see. Thank you so much for sharing, Leslie.
Anytime.
We have, yes, if anti-racist political leaders can take the helm, we can hope for greater authentic changes in policy. Thank you, Lizzie. Lizzie, be free.
It makes me think about the recent debate. I think it was the vice presidential debate, and when Pence said, "Well, Trump doesn't have problems with, race and religion and whatnot," and then he identified him as having, his son-in-law is Jewish, and it's sort of the same old, my friend is Black, my son is Jew, my son-in-law is Jew. It's sort of as if that's that somehow defines somebody as anti-racist. And it is usually the clearest sign that the person has no idea what they're talking about. And so, right, we really have to look at people's records, what policies do they support and what policies do they not support? And so important to be looking at people's records. And yeah.
And if you've ever had the experience of watching an election or returns from an election and watching your own civil rights be taken away, you understand how important it is. And so even if it's not your civil rights that are being taken away, it could be next. And these things happen. They have happened within my lifetime. So I'm sure they've happened within all of our lifetimes. And it's pretty intense.
It is. I see Donna has her hand up. Go on, Donna.
I do. Thank you. What's so interesting about this question is that I feel like my ears have changed. So when we say, listen to what the candidates say or look at what they do, Kendi has just pointed out so many language assumptions or assumptions that we make about what someone means when they talk about helping other people or equal education or cleaning up cities. There's just nuances to that I had never felt I had listened to before. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but things that sound nice, I'm realizing now are racist statements that I didn't identify as being racist. So when we listen to the candidates, I'm saying, I feel like I've got a new set of ears to listen to. I mean, I made up my mind a long time ago with this vote, but going forward, I think there's another level of information and discussion and use of language that I didn't know needed to exist.
We often hear them referred to as dog whistles, right? So I think that's indicative of that new hearing that you're having. You get that pitch that you weren't hearing before, like, oh, that's not so nice as it sounds.
But I think in addition to the dog whistles, which, seem like once you start hearing them, those are the obvious ones, the less obvious ones that I think are the assimilationist, and for me as an educator, right, we speak about the achievement gap, right? We've all said it, we've all talked about it. And yet, as Kendi points out, it's the opportunity gap. It's not an achievement gap. It's an opportunity gap and a resource gap. And so even the language of achievement is the language of white supremacy. Yeah. So.
And
Gloria, sorry. Yeah.
I was gonna say Gloria Ladson-Billings refers to it as the education debt, which I like even better because we owe it now, right? We have benefited from this all this time. We, and especially we who work in the schools or who used to work in the schools, owe it to folks.
Yeah, I like that, education debt.
And I just want to recognize that we had a few folks just be admitted to the room. So I just want to take on one more minute or so to go over question number 1. And Karen, if you could put that back up on the screen, I'll read it one more time just to see if our new folks would like to chime in. And how to be an anti-racist, Kendi thinks that we should assess candidates as being racist or anti-racist based on what ideas they're expressing and what policies they're supporting, and not what they say is in their bones or their heart. Do you agree with him? Why or why not? And again, this is being recorded, just to reiterate, because we did have a few folks come in, and you can speak or you can add your response to the chat box and we can read it aloud for you.
I think this question also speaks to, impact, our intent and impact, right? And that we often, I think people get distracted or caught up in the, well, that's not what I meant. I had these great intentions, or I'm colorblind, that's not how I feel, I treat people equally, just be a good person, if people would just follow the law, right? So all those things that people truly believe that they're speaking from their heart, and that's informing policy, that perspective is informing policy and what the impact of those policies becomes.
Yes.
Yeah, and along those lines, in terms of intent and impact, it's also so much about who the candidate or the politician is surrounding themselves with, and who's shaping who they're allowing to shape their policies, and what those people's beliefs might be. Because even if you think the politician in question may not, be so, racist and dislike every Black person or something, if they're going to be taking, direction from people who clearly don't care what's going to happen to certain groups or how it's going to impact certain groups, then that's something that everyone who's in a position like this should be smart and knowledgeable enough to know to be looking that extra step and figuring out what the impact is going to be.
100%. And I want to add, actions speak louder than words. And if somebody's showing up and supporting policies that go against what it is that they say is in their bones or in their heart, then that's there's a lot of dissonance there. And AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, is like someone who shows up, and I believe her in both ways. I believe what she's saying is in her bones and in her heart, and I believe that she is she's got integrity there. The policies that she's supporting are she's showing up and meaning what she's been saying. And that also to me shows that there's a way to be a politician that we've all, I think, been told or taught, or we've seen that politicians aren't supposed to be. They're politicians, they show up this way because, and we come up with all these excuses for why politicians are crooked or backward. And so I will end there and pass it off to Kathy for question number 2, because we just ate up some time.
All right, thank you very much. Question number 2 says, anyone who values immigrants from European countries and devalues immigrants from Latin America is guilty of racism. Have you ever been guilty of this type of racism? And discuss unique resilience and resourcefulness of that people possess if they leave everything in their native country behind and immigrate to another, as Kendi examines in the chapter on ethnicity, which is chapter 5, page 56, if you want to look it up. Any thoughts on that? Are you necessarily racist if you are fine with immigrants from European countries, but not from Latin American countries? Anyone? Don't forget the chat is open. If you're not comfortable speaking, we can.
Leslie has her hand.
Okay, great. Go ahead. And you're muted.
Am I muted? Am I good now? Okay. I'm guilty of race. Having thought through, I think about my reaction to the Puerto Rican Day Parade, and it wasn't all Puerto Ricans, but it was racist. It was a racist idea that I didn't want to go out on that day. I live in Manhattan, and that I didn't want to go out on that day, or I thought the superintendents were perfectly of different buildings on Fifth Avenue were very right to have covered all the plants and taking them off that day. But I think our country is basically the better for all people who've come in. I'm several generations, like 2 generations down from immigrant, 3, all the grandfathers came over. But I can see Kendi doing this. It's interesting in cast. Elizabeth Wilkinson says about Einstein coming over, and how he never realized there was so much racism against Black people. And he became very friendly with Paul Robeson and quite a few of the better known Black people, and said that the racism was the worst thing in the United States. Just a sideline.
Thank you for sharing. And can I ask you, why do you think you had the feelings you did about the Puerto Rican Day Parade? Like, where did you get those ideas from, if you're willing to share?
Well, it was scary. People were, tops were pulled off of girls in the park, and it was all in the news, you know, and it was just a day that you either wanted to be out of town, or they've since made it more patrolled, more controlled. Mm-hmm. And I don't know that, and it just unfortunately happened on the day of that parade versus the Greek parade or other parades. But I'm just, you know, saying I experienced it, and I don't consider myself racist, but you asked about ideas where you saw that we were racist, or I was, you know, the individuals present today were racist, and that I would have to, you know, fess up.
Thank you.
I wonder if those same things, it wasn't that they happened at the Puerto Rican Day Parade, perhaps they happened at the St. Patrick's Day Parade also, but they were put on the news when they happened at the Puerto Rican Day Parade, and maybe not put on the news when they happened at the St. Patrick's Day Parade. I don't know. I just wonder.
It was there was a lot of ruckus around versus a different kind of ruckus for the Steuben Day Parade, the Irish Parade, all the others. It was noticeably violent.
I think Amy makes a really good point, though. I think the way we cover things,
absolutely.
I was reading about for example, the coverage of the Black Lives Matter parades, demonstrations, and protests. Again, language, right? People who call them riots, that's a very loaded word. They're demonstrations. And according to a not-for-profit group that monitors demonstrations all over the world, 93% of the Black Lives Matter protests are peaceful. So why is it that when Americans are polled, 41% say that they're violent, right? And so the analysis that was done by this group is in what's framed, how biased media frames and shows you over and over again, right? So if instead of showing you the 93% of the peaceful protests, but there's one window that's broken, and I show it over and over again, that is part of our training, right? This is part of what feeds our sense of that's violent, that's peaceful, that's safe, that's not safe. So it's really important to understand where we're getting our information. And again, cultural expression, right? So what we might consider as not acceptable, really important to look at how different cultures celebrate. And it may feel unusual to us, different, and different in this country has so often been considered as less than, as alien, not acceptable. So really important to examine all of our reactions, as Amy was saying, like, look at how did that make you feel and where do you think that came from? So thank you for sharing.
Well, I hope I've grown.
Well, you shared here. I think that's huge. I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. It's very brave. Others?
All right.
Donna?
Shall we? Donna, yeah.
I'm sitting here thinking that maybe I'm prejudiced against European immigrants. I have a sort of feeling like they're here to take jobs away. Whereas, and maybe this is because when I was a teenager, I lived in Puerto Rico for a summer and traveled there and was at a camp with international students. So I have a big affinity for the people who speak Spanish and live in, you know, Spanish countries, and so I see them as loving, friendly people because of that early bias that I was with. And I don't know where my early bias against Europeans is, but I'm thinking that I am racist that way, which I hadn't really thought about at all. I don't know, or maybe it's the knee-jerk liberal, always going for the perceived underdog in me that makes me feel an affinity for people who are coming up from Latin America and Mexico and just trying to feed their kids and get a roof over their head. I don't know. But I don't like Europeans.
Okay. We have a chat comment. It says part of our anti-racist work has to be working towards the end of determining human value based on ethnicity and race. We can't have favorite immigrant countries, and we have to honor whatever journey someone has taken to live in the US, and acknowledging that Black and brown people have a journey history of being stolen and forced to be on this soil. So,
I think too, it's when you look at the immigration history in the United States, you know, we often forget how we have used, and I think this pertains to what Lizzie says in her chat, this idea of hierarchy, and that somehow we're always making superior and inferior. And this has been a part of our fabric as a nation for hundreds of years. We rewrite it every single, you know, decade. It seems that somebody's on top and somebody's beneath, and then you're here for a certain amount of time, and then you get moved up or you don't. And I think this is a huge issue for all of us to be aware of, not just anti-Black racism, but the ethnic racism that, yeah, that many of us may have absorbed as children. And so I think this particular chapter was very eye-opening.
Yeah, I loved when he was talking, you know, in this chapter, he's talking about, you know, how folks will say that Black people are lazy, but then they'll call people of color who come to America, you know, they'll like say, well, look at this one, they'll exceptionalize them. But, you know, and in the question, it was, you know, discuss the unique resilience and resourcefulness people possess. It's like, it takes a lot to like uproot yourself, go to another country and show up and say that you're gonna make it somewhere. So when you know, there's got to be so much intention behind that. Mm-hmm. And I've always admired immigrants who are entrepreneurial, or who, yeah, I mean, just that. I just want to just take a moment to honor them, because I'm always like, well, of course they're exceptional. They weren't born in America, which is like unfair, but also in ways it's layered. How about that? It's complex, but I really enjoyed reading that part. Not that people, you know, will compare and exceptionalize, but it was just information I didn't know about, the, you know, some of the statistics around people who are immigrants who immigrate to the U.S.
Well, you know, you see that too, Erica, even within the Jewish, you know, world, a lot of ethnic division, right, between German Jews and Russian and Polish, and, you know, we got here first. And so, you know, it's like every subgroup in this country has its attitude towards the immigrants. But as you say, it takes so much. It's a self-selected group, right, that come here. They left. And Kendi points that out, right, what it took to come here. But I thought it was an interesting question he posed to that student that he confronts, which is the question you should be asking is, why do people of color who come here from other countries, why are they still making less than white people? right? So as opposed to pitting yourselves against each other, how about this question? Why are, so race is an issue, even if you don't think it is absolutely, look at your paycheck, right? Look at your paycheck compared to white immigrants from Northern Europe, yeah.
We have another message here that says, I'm biased against policies that allow people to adopt foreign-born children when there are plenty of kids to adopt in the US. I'm fine if the person is adopting a relative, but I find it interesting, in quotes, that people want to adopt minorities from overseas or even white kids from Eastern Europe when the foster care system is overflowing with kids. I find bringing in foreign kids biased against American children, regardless of the race of the adopted child. And that does very, very, very often tie in with racial lines in America as well. The interesting points that are brought up there. And I wanted to go back to what Donna was saying, racist against Europeans. I want to kind of distinguish between being biased or prejudiced against people who come over here and can become white, like the Europeans, or the anti-Black racism. That's the racist. The racism comes with the power that we get as white folks, or the powers that the institutions have against certain people. So it's a nuance of the word, and I understand what you're saying, Donna, and I appreciate what you're saying. But racism, anti-Black and brown racism, I think are the things that we want to really look at, specifically anti-Black racism, because if we can ever dismantle that and get to the bottom of it, I think that a lot of the rest of this will kind of fall away. I think a lot of, interesting how people seem to be, I don't have numbers on this, I don't know if things are changing, more willing to adopt kids of color who are not American, who are from elsewhere, from this country or that country, or exotic or whatever, not as much necessarily willing to adopt Black American babies. So I find that interesting as well, as did our chatter over here.
All right, shall we go on to question number 3? Kathy, what do you think?
Sure.
All right. So thank you, everybody. This is powerful stuff. There's a stronger and clearer correlation between the levels of violent crime and unemployment levels than between violent crime and race, but that's not the story that policymakers have chosen to tell. So we'd like to know why you think that is, and how might our society and culture change if policymakers characterized dangerous Black neighborhoods as dangerous unemployed neighborhoods. So again, the difference, there's that language. How would things change if we were to look at quote unquote dangerous Black neighborhoods as dangerous unemployed neighborhoods?
Forgive me, please, is this the book, How to Be Anti-Racist, or is it Stamped from the Beginning, where Kendi starts out with the whole racism and capitalism are conjoined twins?
He does. It was Stamped from the Beginning, okay. But he does speak about it in both, actually.
Okay. That whole metaphor, I think, is just fabulous and phenomenal, and this speaks to it, right? Capitalism and racism are conjoined. Why is there so much unemployment in Black and brown neighborhoods? It allows us as white folks or whomever to say, well, this is my proof that Black people are lazy, like Erica was talking about before. But the whole systems were built together in a certain reason. This speaks to it. I'd love to hear what other people have to say.
Yeah. So Leslie.
Basically, it's Kendi's basic tenet that policies are justified by ideas. And if you based it on crime or other things, you couldn't justify the racist policies. So therefore, it exists.
I think he says that it's self-serving, right? So that it serves power. It serves power. So you always have to ask, who does this policy benefit? And who does it benefit to say that the neighborhood is dangerous? Well,
Right, and that wouldn't support it.
that wouldn't support it.
I mean, that would support the, that would support racism.
Right.
Where if you called it unemployment or violence, that would not have anything to, that could not reflect back on racism and justify racist policies.
Right.
And also, I think if politicians or if these people speaking were going to be, honest and mention the unemployment part, well, then that's something that they can and should be doing something about. And if you can blame it, even subtly and kind of, secretly blame it on a person's race, the people in charge can kind of act like there's not much they can do about it, or that it's not their fault, or it's not the policy's fault.
It's the personal and moral failings of people of a certain race, right? All that.
Yep.
Right. It's cheaper. I mean, this is what I've always thought. It's just cheaper to blame people. There was I think Kendi mentions early in the book that there was a national longitudinal study done of youth, 13-year study from 76 to 89, and found that it found that young Black males were engaged in more violent crimes than young white males. However, when they compared only employed young males of both races, the difference in violent behavior vanished. So therefore, the correlation is so direct, right? Communities with a higher share of long-term unemployed workers also tend to have higher rates of crime and violence. So why aren't politicians, policymakers looking at things like that? And I would say because it costs money, because it costs more money. Maybe it's cheaper to throw money at police and say, take care of the problem and we'll blame it on people. Maybe people we have a whole segment of the country that has a great difficulty with what they see as assistance, right? So if we had a war on unemployment, oh my goodness, people might say, wow, how can we spend money on that? But if we want to throw tens of millions of dollars at police and incarceration, for some reason, people accept that as an acceptable alternative.
And I think it's not so much that it costs money as that it costs profit. It costs certain people their profit. They don't get as much profit.
Very good point.
Why can we have mass incarceration? Because who are we incarcerating? These people who we dehumanize in the first place.
Yeah, although ironically, if you have a war on unemployment and and you give jobs to people, you make a long-term investment in your community.
But it costs those who are making the policies profit. It costs them money, right?
Yes, absolutely.
A couple of chats here. Language and words are carefully chosen by politicians and policymakers to maintain or create systems that help promote their agendas. Again, and I would argue myself, this is me adding this, to serve their capitalist notions. And again, increasing certain people's wealth. And then calling it a dangerous unemployed community, quote, places the blame on the real problem, but creates a situation where the policy has to change, which is much of what we've been saying here, right? If we're calling it what it is, then we have to actually face it. If we can continue to blame people, certain people who look a certain way who aren't me, then I'm good to go. I can just keep it this way and try to grab my piece of the pie.
To talk about class, I don't know how much our society would change. I don't know how much it would change, because dangerous unemployed also nobody wants that. Nobody wants that either. Those are also looked down upon. I personally, I guess if I were to change the sentence, I would change the word dangerous to maybe underprivileged unemployed neighborhoods, because even dangerous is like, what does that mean? Just anyway, I'm just like thinking through the sentence and thinking about really, as Kendi talks about Martin Luther King Jr. for a moment. And we know that Martin Luther King Jr. Was talking right before he was assassinated about class. And really that's what it's about. So as soon as you say unemployed, I feel like I feel like you don't have too much of a shift. You have you're gaining a little bit more of the population's sympathy and hopefully empathy, but I don't think it ultimately would really be a huge societal change.
Right. I think that's a good point with language, Eric. I mean, he does use the word dangerous, and it triggers people, and it isn't going to get them to buy in. But I do think the focus is on looking at unemployment as the precursor, right? Again, where is the problem? The problem is not in people. The problem is in situation, in history, in long-term treatment and lack of access to jobs and housing and healthcare. And so when we look at a neighborhood and we see, oh, violent crime is going up, right? People are going to make that connection to danger, even though it's not a fair assessment, and it's an ugly assessment. But you have to change the language, at least with regard to where is it coming from? And if we make a war on unemployment, right? How would that change our perception of people who don't have enough? So I think I don't see anything left in the, Lizzie, we read yours out loud, so I'm going to turn that over to Amy.
So our final question for tonight is, why do you think it is so hard for people not to assess other cultures from their own cultural standards? How does doing this trap people into racist ideas?
This is a tough one. Well, people tend to have pride in their culture, whether or not their culture is right or wrong. People tend, hold on a second.
There's something in the chat that just says most of us don't even know we are doing this biased assessment. I would have to agree with that. And Erica's back. Yes?
Yeah, my kid was stopped scraping the bowl. Refocusing. Yeah, I think that there's a lot that rides on who we are and our pride. We have a lot of pride around who we are and our experiences and how we were raised. And again, whether or not, we have positive or negative history in our background, but it's just easy to let that pride come through as what's right. And I think that we do that a lot here in America. Meanwhile, the rest of the world thinks something differently. But you just see people running around like America is the greatest country in the world. And I'm like, wait, what? But I don't understand. So I think that people are just easily trapped into racist ideas because they don't have any opportunity to experience other situations. And here in America, we tend to place ourselves in bubbles around people who look and sound just like ourselves. And so it's hard to know what's going on outside of your world if you are not stepping outside of your world.
I would
And
agree.
the messages come from everywhere. I know this was big in white fragility, which I know we haven't read here yet, but that white is normal, right? Particularly here in America, our American culture, it is what passes for normal. It's just the way things are done, as opposed to it's a specific cultural way of being, so, it's baked into everything that we do, the messages that we get from the media, etc.
And that's the trap, right? That white norm is that standard that everything else is othered from.
Mm-hmm. And right, and less than, not only other, less than, all that.
I think somebody said earlier on about, if it's not you, when we start leaving people out, right, of the conversation, that if it isn't your particular group, it will be, right? And I've been reading a book by Nell Irvin Painter, and it's called The History of White People. It's really quite fascinating in terms of the layers of prejudice within even the white culture. So when we buy into whiteness, what are we even buying into, right? So we're proud of our culture, but what does our culture really represent? And so it's important for us to question that, right? So for so long in this country, white didn't mean people like me, right? White meant this idea of Nordic and Teutonic and from certain parts of Europe and not others, and looking a certain way and being tall and blonde and blue-eyed. And, you know, where do we end up with that kind of, you know, race theory, right? We end up where in Nazi Germany, but it was here and it is here and it's part of us. And so when we get all excited about our culture, we have to be so careful to not put it in again to that hierarchical model that so many of us have been raised with. Because none of us, I don't think anybody here tonight would consider themselves on the top of that, which means all of us are fighting this top percentage of people who are benefiting, right? They're benefiting from this hierarchy. And I think it's so important that we all look at how we can connect, right? How do we shift that? How to make things work for all of us, the majority of us. We do actually have time. We have one more question. We have 5 questions tonight.
Yep.
We do have 5 questions.
We do have 5 questions. We don't usually.
I'm used to I'm used to
We don't usually. Yeah.
I do have a comment in the chat, or we do have a comment. Most of us were raised with the notion of our nation being a melting pot where we all become the same. And as we can see, all of us become the same, right? Only certain people have been allowed to be subsumed into that. And there still is a certain people who look a certain way, which actually relates to our next question in a lot of ways, who are not part of the melting pot. So Erica, you want to go with the next question?
Yeah, happy to. Jumping into it.
All right.
Oh, one of my favorites. Question number 5 is saying inequities between light and dark African-skinned African Americans can be as wide as inequities between Black and white Americans. How have you seen colorism play out in real life and or in the media?
Leslie, looks like she's got her hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to suggest vis-a-vis this question, The Vanishing Half, which is about 2 sisters who were raised in a community of very light colored, and how one passes and then one eventually has a very dark child who she brings back to the community. And I recommend the book, but I just think because the question was how it's playing out in the media. So I think that this is, and it's currently a bestseller, etc. So I suggest that. But I think there has always been a certain amount of people who could pass. There was a movie, Pinky, where the woman, I'm in my 70s. So, and that movie was about a woman who passed for white. So it's been around, and I think there's definitely prejudice within the Black community that white is that light is better. I don't agree with it, but there definitely is. And they also had, I think Kendi pointed out that lighter skinned Blacks were paid above and hired quicker than dark skinned Blacks by whites and Blacks.
I would take out the word were and probably put in the word are.
Are,
I think that-
yes, yes, thank you.
I have another chat here that says, in the media, it is interesting how when you have Black women in commercials and films, it's usually lighter women versus a really dark woman, which reinforces the norms of beauty that lean towards whiteness. And with that being said, this person says, just because someone is light doesn't mean they don't face racism. I think absolutely to both of those.
Yeah, there's
Comments.
I'll jump on that. Leslie, what was the name of the book that you were talking about?
The Vanishing Half.
Okay. And I don't know if anyone had seen it. Have you seen the movie from, I don't know, maybe the 40s, Imitation of Life?
Oh, yeah, yes,
Yeah, that was an incredible, incredible film
yes.
about a little girl who's born to a Black mother who's
Mhm.
also
Oh, I do.
a maid. It's outstanding.
Right.
I like totally recommend anyone go home and watch it. And the little girl has a lot of shame for the film. It's depressing. It's depressing, but it's beautifully done. The little girl is shameful of her mother, and I remember the moment where her schoolmates realize that she is Black is when her mother goes into the schoolroom and tells her
Yes.
to come on. She's like, I'm her mother, and it is out. I'm just getting chills right now. It's outstanding.
Yeah.
Another. I love thinking about it in the media. Blackish did a great episode of I'll try to find out what the name of it was, on colorism, because Blackish is a TV show on Fox. I'm not sure if you know about it. It's incredible as well. And Blackish has like just everyone in the family ranges in different color, but there's one specific episode that really tackles colorism and talks within this family about how everyone feels. Like some of the light-skinned folks are actually feeling like they're like, what do you mean? I'm not, I'm just as Black, and I know what you're talking about. But like a lot of times people who are light-skinned do not understand what those additional what the additional levels of discrimination feel like. Like even as a brown person, I've got good hair and good skin, and like I'm darker, but I'm actually still considered by some people to be just lighter. And I was, there was a time where I had to run away from a few girls in high school because they wanted to beat me up for it. And it was like, and we happen to be friends now, but it was 25 years ago. And it's a real thing. It's a real thing, and it puts communities against one another. That's all.
And it has real costs, as I think Leslie had said, lower pay. Kendi mentions about attendance at different colleges, right? We're really divided in terms of who went to vocational school and who went to the prestigious historically Black colleges and universities. So the color line affects people's whole lives in terms of what they have access to, what people have access to. So important to recognize. And again, not to create a monolithic, homogenous group out of any group, right? Kendi continues to say individuals, right? That's what this is all about, not grouping people together.
I think about how this impacts systems and socialization, but when I read the question, I immediately thought of a scenario where 4 of my Black male students were at an athletic practice at Deep Stadium in Uptown Kingston and went to CVS to get drinks afterwards and used the bathroom. And the 2 lighter skinned boys walked in together and walked directly to the back of the store, and they used the bathroom. And the 2 students who were much darker walked in together and were immediately asked to give up their backpacks and leave them at the front of the store. And they knew that they could see their friends with their backpacks at the back of the store. They knew exactly what had happened in that moment. And they questioned it. And the person in the store became much more insistent. And they became, kind of gave each other that knowing look and thought, like, we're gonna take this on. We're gonna stand here and, make our case. And and call this person out on this situation. And, you know, the potential in that moment for things to get, you know, really dangerous for those two boys. And then the four of them processing that afterwards. And that's just, you know, one of, I'm sure, many, many examples throughout their day, week. Yeah.
Mhm.
See it play out in such a blatant way.
Definitely brave young people, Donna wrote. Yeah, yeah, it does. You know, a situation like that can become extremely dangerous. So
Mhm. Mhm. Should we move on?
Yeah.
we should.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, and you know, just thinking about light and dark African Americans, and just like you know, making sure that, for whatever reason, this just made me think of the idea of like white Americans at protests actually walking on the outside of protests. I don't know why that just like prompted me to, just like, I guess it's the contrast, but it's racism really. It's just ultimately not necessarily tied to this, but anyway, just I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you, Erica.
Yeah.
So, Kathy.
All right, so we are just about wrapping up here, and before we finish out, we just want to encourage you all, as we try to each time, to find ways to get active in the movement for racial justice. We talked a little bit about candidates. Make sure that you are supporting candidates who you feel support what you find important. You're here at, you know, how to be anti-racist. Make sure you get candidates who are working to make policies that are anti-racist. Make sure you hold their feet to the fire once they're elected. Make sure if your person doesn't get elected, you're calling them anyway. Whoever gets in there and reminding them why what they're doing is not okay for us. Work with your local organizations to get out the vote. Make sure that our democracy functions in a fair and equitable way. If we cannot all vote, it's not going to function in all of our interests. It's going to continue to function for just the few. Erica?
That's me.
Yep.
I'm gonna try not to babble. So just to give an action item, you can attend the Wednesday Walks for Black Lives in Kingston. It's generally at Academy Green, as you can see on this beautiful screen. There is a Facebook page, Kingston Walk for Black Lives, and they had postponed last week, so they had it yesterday, and they're going to have another one next week to keep with the regular schedule. So the next one is the 21st, generally at 4:30, but just check their Facebook page to see when and what time and where, because we are going to have a time change after November 1st, and we're, you know, Radio Kingston's trying to figure out how does that work. And I also want to say, while you are all here, today is the last day to complete the 2020 census. Please complete the census. Please complete the census and message people that you know and ask them to complete the census. If you talk to anyone between now and midnight, ask them if they have completed the census, even if you've asked them before. I've asked people multiple times, like the same person like 3 times. It's just very important, and our counts are being counted actually matters. It helps to fund a lot of our organizations and helps to determine a lot of like our election details and all that jazz. Just very important. So please support Black-owned businesses as well in our community. In Kingston, there's it's Rams Valley just opened in Uptown Kingston. They have the delicious food. They have amazing sorrel juice is my favorite. It's incredible and addictive. Seasoned Delicious just opened in Energy Square at the corner of, I'm gonna mess it up, I don't even know what that one street is. Cedar. Thank you. I just never remember Cedar and Broadway. Seasoned Delicious food is great. Ruby Mays is downtown, and on and on and on. 41% of Black-owned businesses in this country have gone under during the pandemic, compared to the 17% of white-owned businesses. And if you don't know which businesses are Black-owned in the Hudson Valley, Chronogram had published a story last June, and we've put that link on our website. I'm not going to say we. It says we, and I'm reading that, but it is not we. I didn't do it.
It's a team effort. No, Karen put it up there.
Yeah, We've added some newer businesses that have since opened up in Kingston as well. And I'm going to pass it off to Charlotte. I have been rambling, by the way, but thank you.
Oh, we love it, Erica. We love your rambling. You just keep on filling the space.
In
Good
the chat,
stuff.
we have a reminder that Etsy does feature Black-owned businesses. So if you happen to want to shop online and go to Etsy, you can filter out Black-owned businesses on Etsy.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. I don't do a lot of shopping on Etsy, but that will be an incentive. Thank you. So we also have a list that we're going to put up in a moment, and it's just, again, getting involved with organizations that are already doing the work, right? So you don't have to reinvent the wheel, but right here in the Hudson Valley, in the Kingston area, I've just listed, I think 6 organizations, or 7, Real Kingston, Tenants Union, looking at housing, Rise Up Kingston, Callie Jane doing amazing work, Harambe, Citizen Action, the library at the A.J. Williams Meyer, African Roots Center, downtown, an amazing space. They are really serving our community. CCE, the Center for Creative Education, NJAN, looking at incarceration, issues around incarceration, and then of course the amazing Nobody Leaves Mid-Hudson, very active immigrant, supporting immigrants in our community and all of what they are facing. So consider time, consider money, get involved, sign up, be present. And finally, please join us in 2 weeks. We will be here on the 29th, again at 5 o'clock for the last of our 3 community discussions. And one more thing is, Amanda, please tell us if you haven't gotten a copy of the book yet, or some books have gone up in the chat. You may want to pick up the Vanishing Half. I saw went up there, and we have resources listed on our website. And of course, if you go into Amanda and Anthony's shop, you will hear so much more or see so much more. Take it away, Amanda.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte. We do still have How to Be an Anti-Racist for 10% off through the rest of the month. So it sounds like almost everybody here has read the book, but if you want to pass a copy on to friends or recommend that they come in and get their own copy, we do have copies available, along with the new journal, the companion journal, Be Anti-Racist, which is a great companion piece to just be jotting things down in as you're reading or just as you're going about your daily life. And you can always give us a call or an email, and we'll be happy to make some other suggestions as well.
Cool. And Erica put in the Ulster Immigrant Defense Network too. So that's in the chat. That's another group. And we'll put these on our website. So if you didn't copy them down tonight. So again, thank you. Our community discussions would not be possible without the technical wizardry of Kingston's very own Karen Levine. She is also responsible for designing our beautiful new Kingston Reads website, where you can find discussion questions, additional anti-racist resources, books, podcasts, videos, and websites.
And so lastly, of course, we love hearing from you, our community. Please reach out to us with any questions or concerns at contact@kingstonreads.org. And again, we're hoping that a few of you might be interested in joining us next Thursday evening from about 6 o'clock to 7 on Radio Kingston to talk about your experience participating in these discussions. So if you are willing and able to do so, please shoot us an email as soon as possible. Again, you can see that address there. It's contact@kingstonreads.org. And I think that's it. Thank you so much for your participation.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks all.
See you in a couple weeks.
Yep. Or see you next week on the radio. Yeah. Or hear you on the radio. Yeah.
All right. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.